solutions. If you look at climate change education, I won't emphasise this, we're doing surveys on it at the moment. It's about science, the science of global warming, rather than the ethics and issues and values, in technical terms, the axiological learning deficit. There's an absorption in the education going on with technical fixes in aid of mitigation and adaptation. There's a real reluctance to explore the guilt or culpability of neoliberal economic growth models and how they are contributing to the problems we face, and very little concern with no growth or slow growth models of the economy and how they might translate into education. We characterise then the climate change problem as a CO2 problem, curable within business as usual terms of reference. And the other side of that is that we've really failed to explore it as a crisis of what I would call, and am calling, an ethically non-inequitable and denatured human condition. We avoid scenarios of disaster and emergency that might be just round the corner. Education for Sustainable Development as a field is saying it should deal with climate change education. But there's some problems here. The field by Canadian scholars has been described as a closing circle in which, because of international pressures, earlier more radical notions of environmental development and global education are being squeezed out to fit a kind of international corporate imperative. It's a hazy definition what sustainable development or education for sustainable development even means. It's the field, many of the authors and thinkers in the field have not come clean about whether sustainable development means sustainable growth and all the problems that come from that. They link sustainable development and sustainable growth as though taken together they'll bring social and economic well-being. The field is a comfortable bedfellow of globalisation. And there's also this notion of triple bottom line. We're going to be concerned about ecological sustainability, social and economic. But if the economic sustainability means increased growth, then that trespasses on the ecosphere, on the ecosphere. You know, which of these three things do we give most weighting to? And how can we give equal weighting to them if economic growth, if development, sustainable development is about economic growth in the economic sphere? The environment is viewed as a resource, natural capital. And we do, the field as such fails to engage with the notion of the other than human and the life chances and life prospects of the other than human. If you take this model of global education, which is one I've advocated for many years now, arguing that we should look at issues in space and time, and it's vital also in global education to look at the global potential of the human being. If we actually look at what's being used, yes, we do a lot on interdependence. We pick up some issues, but mainly in sustainable development, the link between environment and development, forgetting often peace and health and other issues along the way, or marginalising them. We give very little time to serious, deep and wide work on futures, personal futures through local, through global futures. The inner dimension, the potentials in the human, centering the various potentials of the human, is given very little space. Again, the individual, the human and the personal condition is less than treated. So here we are. There's a collusion with the business as usual paradigm and agenda I'm suggesting, yet we're in, and I'm quoting your conference literature here, we're in a race between learning and the possibility of self-destruction. Etienne Bender said that, and that's in your conference pack. It's in the promo literature for today. With this race going on, but how can it ever be a fair race if we collude with the business as usual paradigm, which is, I would submit, is causing the problem anyway? Doesn't work very well. Spanish writers, Perez and Lorente, have bemoaned what has happened to environmental education and ESD. ESD discourse has contributed quite successfully to diluting and blurring all the work of sensitization, consciousness raising and denunciation that has been constructed by pro-environmental social movements in recent decades, and more recently by environmental education. In this closing circle, the denunciation, the really opening of the issues, is happening less and less. And then I come to a favourite Sufi, Iranian Persian story of mine. He was found to be looking for it under a light. This is the lost key. He was found to be looking for it under a light. He looked and couldn't find it. Finally, someone asked where he had lost the key. He answered, well, I did in fact lose it over there. And when asked why he didn't look for it over there, he said, well, it's dark over there, but there's a light here for me to look. The lost key. We don't look in the darkened corner where we've lost things, but we look in places which have a kind of comfortability, less challenge about them, as we search for solutions and ways forward. What I want to do in this more central part of what I want to look at is to go into the darkened corner and suggest what might have to happen if we're really going to bring transformation to the learning of adult and school-age students today. So, educational thoughts from a darkened corner. Given the climate, thought one, there's half a dozen of them. Given that climate change and other crises are already upon us, and given the looming prospect of them deepening still further, silently and slowly, but also abruptly and thickly, transformative learning needs to confront denial and address despair, pain, grief and loss. I'm making what I think in our present culture is the controversial suggestion that true transformation cannot come without addressing despair and grief and loss fully and centrally in terms of what we do. Diarmuid O'Murchu, in his great book, Quantum Theology, writes this: we live in a dark age, but alas, nobody wishes to entertain the notion. We're unable to prevent the darkness because our addictiveness and compulsiveness keep us firmly rooted in denial. The whole thing is too painful to look at, so we choose to befriend our pathology rather than befriend its deeper truth. How much are our educational prescriptions today a befriending of the pathology rather than looking deeply at the illness that's around, the change that's really needed? I think there's the issue in terms of denial of what we call cognitive dissonance. That means, as per my Ryanair trip, it means that I know what we need to do in terms of climate change and a range of issues. I know them, but something about the way I expect my life to orderly unfold means I don't attune everything I do with it. Tons of us do this. You know, there's middle-class families and whatever across Ireland, across the UK, who are conscious of the dangers of climate change, for instance, but they still will climb on that 747 for the can't do without summer vacation. Tony Blair did the same quite often. Britain is leading the way in terms of climate change before he got on his private jet to the Caribbean for a long weekend. ESD advocates are meeting all over the world to talk about the problems of climate change and sustainability, and heaven knows what their carbon footprint is. What we say and what we do, and different parts of what we think, are in dissonance. And